Hello, everyone. I am Rashad Robinson. I am the president of Color of Change. And I am so excited about this conversation we're going to have today, and so interested in what we're going to learn, because today we have someone that's going to come and teach us some things and share with us some things. We have the new president of the National Education Association, sometimes known as the NEA, Becky Pringle. Welcome, Becky. It's so good to see you.
Thank you, Rashad. It's good to be here.
All right. Well, you've just become president of the largest labor union in the country at a crucial time for our nation on so many fronts, but in particular, as it relates to the education of our young people, as it relates to schools, as it relates to not just the infrastructure that it provides in terms of the health, safety, and future of our young people, but jobs, communities, and so much more. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about sort of what this moment is sort of presenting for you. And in that, maybe share a little bit for folks who may not know that much about the NEA and who are watching. Share a little bit more about the NEA and the scale and scope and what you all do in terms of working to fight for public education in this country.
So thank you, Rashad. I have to tell you, when your face popped up in the Zoom, I got a big old smile on my face because you are a reminder of what's possible, even in moments like this. I've told leaders, our NEA leaders and other leaders in other movements all over this country, I certainly chose to run for this position, but I didn't choose the moment that everything would be converging like it is right now. And I am constantly reminded that I have fellow leaders like you who are with me along this journey. So I just need to take this moment to thank you for the incredible leader you are, but also just for the work that the Color of Change has done. I mean, you have focused like a laser on addressing issues that impact most, especially Black Americans, but other people of color. And I want to applaud what you've really taken time to dig into, from the work you've led with the Hollywood writers' rooms to address what's happening in the media, to the extraordinary leadership you showed with the accountability with Facebook and other companies to really take on racism and xenophobia. And then, of course, the work that you did to defund and demystify and bring into the spotlight the I would call sinister work of ALEC. To actually really strip away rights and workers' ability to organize and lift their voices in a collective way, to really cripple social systems. So I just need to start there, Sean, because you are doing such incredible work, and we need the kind of leadership that you are exhibiting in this moment. Always have, honestly, but in this moment, strong and clear and focused, and most importantly, you are unapologetic.
Yes.
So I need to thank you for that, for being so bold and visionary, and then taking action. So I am delighted, pleased, so excited that you are partners in the work. You asked me to talk a little bit about NEA. The National Education Association, as I know you know, is the largest labor union in this country. We represent not only teachers, but we also represent faculty in higher education. We represent all categories of the other caring adults who surround our students with support and nurture them and help with their learning, from bus drivers to school secretaries to paraprofessionals to counselors. And Rashad, we also represent what we call aspiring educators. So those are our students in colleges who are studying to become teachers. So we have a huge, very diverse population of Americans who belong to the NEA. And one of the things I'm so excited about the partnership that we've had and how it will grow and develop over the next years as I am leading the organization. It's about 5 years ago at our national convention where 10,000 delegates come together to actually set the policy of the NEA. They voted unanimously to commit the National Education Association to taking on institutional racism. Since then, we have boldly made statements to support the Black Lives Matter movement. And not only that, Rashad, we actually looked at ourselves and we said, okay, first of all, if we're going to lead in this movement, we actually have to do work. 78% of our members are white women. And we knew that we needed to help them along their journey of awareness so they could actually be the racial and social justice leaders we need them to be in this moment, not only for our students, but in our communities and throughout the United States. And so we started that work 5 years ago, and we talked a lot about that recently, that work that we started internally, doing our internal work, as well as partnering with organizations like you, positioned us to lead in this moment that we could not possibly have imagined we would find ourselves in. So Rashad, we went from when a few years ago when we saw the Black Lives Matter movement really explode onto the scene, from educators, leaders being very timid about explicitly saying those words. And you saw people kind of like, oh, all lives matter and all of that kind of thing happen. And because of the training, the journey of awareness around around implicit bias, around white supremacy culture, around really challenging our own education and where we are in this moment, we, the National Education Association, actually, our leaders throughout our state affiliates, on our local affiliates, issued affirmative statements in support of Black Lives Matter. That is a huge change from where we were just a few years ago. And it really speaks to this moment, that this moment in this country where we are reckoning with systemic and institutional racism that has existed forever. In education, the inequities existed forever. It's not that we didn't see them or pay attention to them, but now in this moment with the light shining, people are realizing they have to step up and be part of the solution, or accept the reality that they are part of the problem.
That is such a great point. And I want to move into talking about COVID and the pandemic and how it's impacted our schools and the kind of work that NEA is doing. But, the disease has had deep disproportionate impact. I like to oftentimes say that the COVID-19 is not racist, but America's systems are, and America is. And as a result, the disease has exposed so many different aspects. Black communities are not vulnerable. Black communities have been under attack and have been targeted and exploited, And so this is not about fixing Black people and Black families, but about fixing the systems that have far too often hurt us and targeted us. And so, I'd love it, right, if you could talk a little bit and go deep with us a little bit as we've got, parents and folks with loved ones in schools. We've got, folks who are going into education, maybe watching. And I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about sort of what this transition has meant for schools and what NEA is sort of advocating for as it relates to ensuring that our students get the education that they deserve and that workers have the protection on the job.
So that's a big question, Rashad. There's just no question this is a watershed moment in this country. And one of the things that I've talked to our members about, our leaders throughout the country, and our partners too, is that we've been, as educators, we've been standing in those gaps forever. You've heard about it. You saw it in the spring, really on everyone was watching as our teachers and our bus drivers were standing in those gaps in the moment. They were delivering food to not just their students, but they realized because they already know. They see students putting food into their backpacks all the time. So they know they're taking it home to their families. And so they were standing in those gaps, those food gaps. We had bus drivers who were driving on their buses to become hotspots so that our students could stay connected. We all saw all of that in the spring. But what I've been saying, Rashad, to everyone, is we can't only stand in the gaps right now. We have to do that. We have to do that. Mm-hmm. We have to, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to address those basic needs right now, because our students are suffering right now. They're hungry right now. They don't have access to, the digital divide is impacting them right now. They don't have access to technology and tools right now. So we're doing right now kind of things, actions. But what I've challenged us, and this is what we're working on, Rashad, is we are thinking deeply about the solutions that we are putting in place in this moment and how we will build that bridge to that aspirational vision we have. So let me talk a little bit let me dig into that a little bit. Mm-hmm. What I've said to our members and to our partners and everyone who will listen to me, this is the vision that I have. That we will reclaim public education as a common good for this country and as the foundation of this democracy. And then we are going to transform it, because Rashad, you and I both know that public education was not designed from the outset to educate students who look like you and me. We know that. The students who lived in poverty, it wasn't designed for that initially. So we have to transform it into a system that is racial and socially just and equitable and designed to actually prepare every student, everyone, to succeed in a diverse and interdependent world. Now, that's a big old vision, right? And we know as educators, we can't do that by ourselves. And honestly, Rashad, we don't want to do it by ourselves, because we believe that it is the shared responsibility of the adults in this country to ensure that you just described it, the COVID-19, everyone's saying it, it's unprecedented and it's shining the light and all of that. We're hearing that, everyone's saying it. And what we are doing with our leaders is we are preparing them to lead in a way that really says and puts front and center that for our students to learn, we have to address the institutional racism that exists in all of the social systems. So we know that our students come to us from food deserts where they're not getting adequate nutrition, which of course predispose them and their families to getting COVID-19. Yeah. We know they don't have access to healthcare, which of course, when they got sick with COVID-19, made them more at risk to succumb to it. We know these things. All of these systems impact our students' ability to learn. We know that economic inequality in this country that is just growing every single day. We see these billion-dollar corporations who have profited during this time, and we have more and more students who are going into homelessness. And so we have to deal with all of those systems. So that means that we have to partner in real and deep ways with all of the people, organizations, governments, local, state, and national, to actually form what I have talked about, and that is a collaborative partnership. And how we're doing it within the NEA is we are training our members, our leaders, to form we're calling labor management collaborations. And in those places in the country, Rashad, where we're out in front of that over the last couple of years, we had a national call to action about a year and a half ago, and we formed that partnership at the national level, and then we partnered at the state and local levels. In those places where they had those partnerships, they actually came together in this moment, and they designed plans that were grounded in safety and science. Something as a science teacher, can I tell you how disturbing and outrageous it is that Donald Trump is not focused on science, and anyone else is not focused on science? Are you kidding me right now? I'm teaching 8th graders about that, Rashad. So anyway, we are looking at those partnerships that are grounded in science. We are listening to experts so they can guide us in when it is safe to go back to in-person learning. So we're doing that. We're not only focused on safety, but that's the basic. You have to keep kids safe and educators safe and alive. But we're also talking about teaching and learning. We're talking about improving that, whether it's online or in person or some kind of hybrid. And so we're doing that by coming together. We convened educators all over this country to talk about best practices in virtual tools. We're providing professional development, not only in academics, but also in social emotional learning. We know that our students and educators, for that matter, are going through a lot of trauma in this moment. And so we're partnering with other organizations to provide the kind of support that our students need right now so that they can continue their learning and we can improve it right now.
You know, there's been so many attacks on public education, and you sort of talked about the way in which corporations have, you know, battled for sort of tax breaks at the expense of our children, and sort of all the ways in which the sort of funding and support to educate, you know, our country's youth is constantly sort of on the table and in budget time. As we enter this, as we continue to have schools open right now, and we are watching as schools are kind of moving into different contexts, some partially open, some not opening at all. What do you believe this means for the future of public education, and for the folks who are watching, who are thinking about sort of how do we continue to fight to ensure that we keep funding and support for our education, as there will be those that will use this moment to say that maybe we don't need schools the same way, that maybe we don't need places, that we can go to all homeschooling and distance learning, as we've already seen a trend in some places that are disproportionately Black and brown. I'd love you to hear about that, because I think a lot of folks who are going to be watching this want their marching orders in terms of how do they fight for the things that their kids and all of our kids need and deserve.
I love the way you ended that, Rashad, that their kids and all of our kids. And that's what I talk to parents about. And it's why we're partnering with them. We partner with the PTA to get a better sense of how our parents are feeling. I actually have two families living with me right now. My daughter and her wife have moved in with their young child, who's now 8 months old. I saw her grow from 2 months to 8 months old. Fabulous.
That's a blessing.
It's truly a blessing. You have no idea.
Yeah.
But I also have my son and his wife and my grandson who just started third grade today. They put a welcome to third grade sign because he's going back virtually right now. Well, so I'm seeing it in my own home and talking with them about what that looks like. And as I talk to them and I talk to other parents across the country, they do want to do what's right, not only for their own student, because that's our job. As parents, it is our job to fight for what's right for our students. And what I'm seeing all over this country is that parents more and more are realizing as they fight for their own students' rights, they need to also stand up and fight for other students' rights, because it actually impacts the quality of education that their students get. So you saw this in the spring, and that hasn't changed in the fall. As we actually did partner with the PTA to do a survey of parents, and that hasn't changed. That parents believe in public education. They want their public education system to work, their local public schools. They want them to be funded adequately. They want to make sure that their students have what they need when they need it. And they are willing to fight to make sure that happens. So we are not seeing an abandonment of public education, but we are seeing more and more parents realizing they actually have to be advocates in this space to ensure students get what they need and educators get what they need to ensure that our students have high quality education. And so we are seeing many, many more parent activists in that space. Of course, we're seeing Betsy DeVos trying to use this moment, which is really sad, and just callously disregarding the safety of our students. So, asking or demanding that our students go back and threatening to take away much needed funding at a time when our states and localities are suffering from funding. We're laying off almost 1 million teachers and other educators at a time when we need more. All of that is happening under Betsy DeVos's reign. Of course, you saw recently her actually saying, and by the way, let's test them. Let's test and punish, blame and shame our students and their community. communities and their parents. Let's keep doing that because we want to spend money on that. We don't want to give our students PPE and our teachers sanitary stations, but we do want to give them tests. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure the big testing companies get their money. So that's what she's focused on. We know that. And we know that, of course, she tried to put in, and Donald Trump is doing the same, trying to put into the latest HEROES Act that's stalled in the Senate. Because again, Mitch McConnell doesn't seem to care that our kids don't have what they need, but it's stalled there because they're trying to play games in, as always, trying to dismantle and destroy public education by schemes, privatizing schemes, voucher schemes, all the usual. This is not new. But what we're seeing, Rashad, is that our parents are standing by the public education system because they know that it can't be one student. It has to be every student. If we are, as a society, if we are not focused on ensuring every student can live into their brilliance, then it's gonna impact the health, safety, welfare, and the pursuit of happiness for other students. And more Americans see that and understand that, and they're seeing their role in that. But here's the thing. We know that our public schools have not met the needs of our Black and brown students, our students living in poverty, our students with special needs. We must do better. And that is what the members and leaders, and I certainly as the president of the NEA, are focused on doing, building those partnerships with our young people. So let's talk about them, inviting them into the space and helping them create that future we need to create. Partnering with organizations like yours in the NAACP, and as in the safety space, we're partnering with the American Association of Pediatrics to make sure we're keeping our students safe. All of those partnerships are designed to be a collaborative effort to really view what we do, Rashad, from that whole student place. These are whole children who are coming to us. We need to surround them with all of those systems of support. And so we're going to do that together. And that is what's at the heart of public education. And our parents and our partners know that, and they are working with us to achieve that.
I'm so happy that you brought us through that right there, because it was so sort of helpful, both in terms of sort of the sort of attacks at the federal level from folks like Secretary DeVos, to the sort of ways in which the education system needs to do work, that teachers associations and others have work to do as it relates to school to prison pipeline, and have been doing work as it relates to school to prison pipeline, and so many issues that serve Black and brown students, and then you have these sort of like these interventions that come out that can be both Trojan horses and in some ways can be opportunities. I'd love for you to talk a little bit to the folks watching about where the NEA stands on charter schools, and in particular as it relates to the sort of accountability on ensuring that as new sort of interventions come down the pipe that are meant to sort of help deal with issues in education, that they actually have rules and that there's actually accountability and that there's structure to ensuring that these systems just don't get to like operate any way they want to without accountability. And, and how that for you relates to just that larger narrative around public education that you were just sort of talking about.
So Rashad, I want your members to know something that they may not know. That the concept around charter schools actually came from the unions. That's where it came from, because we wanted to find a way to have innovation actually impact what was happening in public schools. So we could address some of the issues that I talked about, the issues of inequity, funding, making sure that all of the regulations that for the most part were coming from places that were farthest away from our students at the federal level, at the state level, that we actually had an opportunity to innovate in a space where we could meet the needs of students in that community, in those schools. And so we came up with this idea of charter schools. And I am here to tell you today that the charter school movement itself is really a failed experiment. We have 30 years of evidence now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can look at studies that say that in some charter schools, we see gains in achievement. Yes, we can. But we do not see any difference in gains versus public schools. And so after millions and millions and multi-millions of dollars have been poured into this experiment, we need to stop. And we need to do what the NAACP did, which I know you know, maybe about 2 years ago, they toured around the country actually and listened to parents. They went from community to community and listened and ultimately issued a report that they said we need to have a moratorium and we need to dig down into this evidence we now have. So some of it was based on what you just said around the transparency, particularly into the financial operations, because we've seen so many of them in the news around malfeasance as it relates to finances. We've seen so many in the news that have shut down and then sent the students back to the public schools. And they do it in a way, Rashad, where in some states they have laws, whereas if a child goes to a charter school, as long as they stay in the charter school until the end of September, then that charter school gets the public funding. But if they send them back October 1st, the funding does not come back with them. In what world is that fair or right to those students? Because now you send them back to the public school without the funding, and the charter school keeps the funding. And you and I both know which students those are. Mm-hmm. Those are the students that that have more challenges and are more difficult to provide the resources they need. So the cost of educating them is higher at a time when that public school has less. So they're draining public schools of funding, but they're sending students back. And of course, the public school doesn't get to decide what students they have. They take all students. The charter schools have that flexibility. So we know that there are just things in the charter school movement that are just wrong and unfair. But let's go another step, Rashad. And this is where going back to the millions of dollars. Yeah. We know that it has become an industry that is not focused on helping our students certainly not focused on helping the system to improve, which was the original intent. We know that we have people who are making money off of our children. That is not okay. And we need to expose that. We need to if we are in a position to continuously learn from charter schools, absolutely, let's do that. But that we should not be designing a system, because that's what's happening right now. A system that is designed to help some students, a system that now that we're digging down into it is actually adding to resegregation of our schools. So we have to peel that apart and understand what's happening and get back to making sure that every student has that opportunity and access.
I really appreciate that. And, earlier you talked about some of the wraparound aspects that impact our young people, that impact sort of their lives, and sort of how the NEA and teachers have to respond to those things. I'd love it if you could talk about just a couple of those things. One is, your support for the HEROES Act as a sort of piece of legislation to provide educators and students and families what they need through this crisis. At Color of Change, we've actually been doing some work on the ground in local communities around demanding access to broadband. Because so many of the young people who are now having to do distance learning have a distance between them and actual access to the sort of technology vehicles that give them the ability to do distance learning. And we have to, create the right amount of pressure on all systems to respond to the needs and concerns. So particularly as it relates to Black and Brown youth, but as it relates to all youth, the HEROES Act, you could say, well, this is about essential workers, and it's about payments to small businesses, and it's about all these different things. Why is the NEA advocating for all of this? So I'd love for you to say a little bit about that, but also say a little bit about sort of what does it mean in this moment to ensure that when we say that, young people are going to have to be educated in a different way, that we ensure that all young people actually can be educated?
So, Rashad, thank you, of course, for the work you're doing to ensure that everyone understands how important this HEROES Act is, not only to our students, but to our economy, to this country. We advocated when the HEROES bill was moving through the House of Representatives. We advocated for a direct funding stream, almost $200 billion, to go to education for the things that you just said, because we know, first of all, there are inequities that have existed, and so we have to fill those gaps. We know the digital gaps are there. We know we have to provide additional nutrition for our students. So we, in the earlier HEROES, in earlier CARES legislation, we actually were able to get some additional money put into those nutritional programs that we know our students and their families rely so much on. We have to continue to do that. We know that our schools are in disrepair. You've heard about safety and ventilation and all of those things. And we know that too many of our schools where our Black and brown students attend already had air quality issues. So we want to make sure that as this funding is appropriated in this latest round, that we can get at some of those systemic issues. And here's the thing, you started out your question with talking about the wraparound services. Yeah. One of the things that we understand as educators is if our state governments and our local governments are suffering from the economic downturn, then all of those services that we need to surround our students with support are going to be decimated. And that's happening already. So it can't only be about the funding specifically to education, but it's got to be that funding. We and in the HEROES Act, we call for $900 billion to go to our states and localities so that they could build up their economies. And we had the healthcare, and we had we dealt with some of the economic inequalities, and we made sure that workers had income so they could feed their families. All of those things that impact whether our students can learn. So we are fighting for that. Right now, we know that the Trump administration and Mitch McConnell are fighting against that. They are not including in their version that state and local relief. We must have that. Otherwise, we're going to destabilize further our communities and our states. And we know that our students need them for all of those services so that they can come to our schools ready to learn. And then you said something else, Rashad, that I want to say in this moment. Mm-hmm. So you talked about the wraparound services. And one of the things that I did, one of the first things I did when I became president is I asked our staff to do an assessment. I wanted them to go out and do just a little bit of field research for me, because I had a theory. I had a theory that in those schools and communities where they actually had worked together to put in place community schools, and they put them in place following all the pillars that we at NEA have outlined that need to be in place that really support the kind of collaborative partnership that must exist between schools and communities. I wanted to know how they fared during the pandemic. And this is what I found out. That those schools, those community schools, were doing, and the students and the communities were doing so much better. And it makes sense, right? Because they had already built those partnerships. And what they told me was that in those schools where they had the partnerships with the local hospital, for example, and already had the partnership there, that those local hospitals were opening up their doors to those families that needed that immediate attention, because either they were suffering from COVID-19 or they needed to get testing. So they provided those services, and they were providing them in school spaces, making sure everything was safe. They already had those partnerships with the Boys and Girls Club. They already had those partnerships with the food pantries. They already had them in place. So their students weren't going hungry. The families were getting fed. They had access to training so that they could work toward getting other jobs if they had been laid off. They went into action like that, Rashad. And so that's what we are fighting for. Even in the funding that's coming from the HEROES Act, we want it designated to establishing more community schools. So we are surrounding our students with those services. And then something else you said that I really want to lift up in this moment, especially for our communities, Rashad. Whenever there's any reporting or the language, because words matter, the language that is used, they always talk about our communities from a place of a deficit.
Yeah.
That makes me crazy. And it not only makes me crazy because I know the riches that are in our communities, but it diminishes us as partners in providing our students with what they need to be successful. And I know all the work that people in our communities are doing to do just that. So we are approaching it from a place of our communities are assets, and we are mining those assets, and we're partnering with them to provide our students with what they need so they can be successful. And our students are seeing their community members do that.
Yeah.
It makes a difference. They see that our students are seeing adults treat them as though they care about them, and that they see them, they hear them, they see their humanity.
Yeah. I mean, people are way more likely to respond to seeing themselves as the protagonist in their story than anything else, right? And I like to oftentimes say that Black folks are the protagonists in the American story of education, right? No group of people have had to fight longer, fight harder, simply to learn how to read, have had to face more indignities in the struggle for education, and have had to, achieve despite so many obstacles and barriers. And that's what a protagonist is in any story. And there are many protagonists in this story of education. It doesn't have to be one. But as long as we remember that Black folks are one of those protagonists, we can approach these conversations from a place of how do we uplift, fight for, and support the hero in our story, rather than something else that oftentimes becomes part of the story about how we talk about education. And so, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to just wrap up with a couple of things. One is that, it would be a huge miss for me to have this conversation with one of our country's most powerful leaders in education, the leader of the largest labor union, and not talk about the election. And not ask you about what NEA is doing, both in terms of mobilizing your members around this election and mobilizing their families and their networks with a deep recognition that, as you said, 70% of your members are white women. You have a tremendous opportunity to be able to connect the very real issues in this election with an opportunity for people to fight for a progressive future, a future where our students and our communities have the things that they need. So I'm just interested to hear a little bit about what you all are doing, what you have planned, how you are working to translate this moment of caring and awareness into action.
So a couple of things, Rashad. We are leading everyone toward our site, educatingthroughcrisis.org, because here's the thing. We have to take a holistic approach to all of this. One of the things I say to our members, I like to paraphrase Plato. Anyone who thinks they are too good or too smart to be involved in politics will be ruled by those who are neither good nor smart.
Yeah.
I think, and can we drop the mic now?
Yes.
And here's the thing, when I became a science teacher over 30, none of your business years ago, I didn't have a clue, Rashad, I didn't have a clue that public education would soon become a notion at risk.
Yeah.
And I realized very quickly that I had to think about the moral obligation and professional responsibility I had for students, children beyond the confines of my own classroom. And I realized that in my union, I had power and strength. And so that's really what got me started being an activist in my union, because I knew I couldn't do it by myself. And I soon learned that every decision that's made for our students about public education, about my classroom, about educators, every decision is a political decision, every one, from the school board to the White House. And so we must be involved in making those decisions, either ourselves, because we are mounting a huge program called See Educators Run. So we, back when 2 years ago with the Red for Ed movement, and we said, you know what, if you are not going to do what's right for our children, then we're coming for you in November. And we did. We had over 1,200 of our educators run, Rashad, and 70% of them won.
Wow.
From school boards all the way to the U.S. House of Representatives, where we had our Teacher of the Year, Jahana Hayes.
Yes.
Because we put all of our weight and power behind her. So we're going to be there. We're going to be there either sitting in those seats of power or impacting them. So what I'm saying to our members is this. First of all, you need to vote. You need to have a plan to vote, because this pandemic has changed everything, right? We need you to think about how you're going to vote safely in person or online. And we have all kinds of resources, educatingthroughcrisis.org. You can go there and get everything you need. That'll take you to our strongpublicschools.org site, which has everything you need to know about the candidates that are running. We do a campaign analysis of the candidates and where they stand on education and communities and children and all of those things, and justice. And so we're sending them to that. But we're saying to our members, you can't just vote. You can't just have a plan for yourself. We need you. I'm saying directly, I'm looking at them in their eye, Rashad, just like I'm looking at you right now. And I'm saying that I need you to get everyone who likes you or loves you or intends to keep living with you, like my children downstairs. I need them to vote. I need them to have that plan in place. I need them to show up. Everyone is saying this is the election of your lifetime. You know, it sounds really trite. And I've been trying to find the right words to say so that people understand that our democracy is at stake in this moment. But you are seeing people who are doing things who are speaking up from both sides of the aisle. I don't care what their political affiliation is. They're realizing that our democracy is at stake in this moment, and they have to do everything they possibly can to save it. And that's what I'm saying to our members. So we are uniting them. We are working with partners. We are with Fair Fight, with Stacey Abrams organizations, with youth organizations, New American Majority organizations, all of those to protect the right to vote, because you know there's a lot of suppression going on out there. So we're working collaboratively with them. And we're asking our members to stand up and volunteer, because we need them. I don't know if you knew this, Rashad, but 1 in every 100 Americans is an NEA member. Yeah, we have members in every congressional district. We actually have the power to influence the outcome of this election. I get very excited about that, Rashad. And so I am doing everything I can possibly do to harness that power and leverage it in a way that we elect pro-public education candidates all up and down this ballot. And that come this January, we don't just elect them, but we hold them accountable. So we have convened educators all over this country. We are influencing and quite honestly have already influenced policy of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And we are all in to make sure that we have that racial and socially just and equitable public education system that's designed so that every student, everyone can live into their brilliance.
I love that. I think that that's just a brilliant and beautiful way to close us. And it really does focus on the future, but the future from a place of power, right? What does it mean to translate our power and our infrastructure? And so I want to encourage people who are watching to go to educatingthroughcrisis.org. That's educatingthroughcrisis.org. Sign the open letter from the NEA. to school boards. That is going to be so incredibly important. So educatingthroughcrisis.org, sign that letter, get involved. We are all going to have to be our brothers and sisters keeper through this struggle of both ensuring that our students have what they need, and that our communities have what they need and deserve. And so I just want to thank you for your leadership, Becky, for your partnership with us at Color of Change. We are better off for the partnership, for being able to work collaboratively together. And I want to just thank you again for your just the way that you are continuing in your entire organization, lead us through this moment, while also dealing both with the external and internal ways that we all have to grow into this racial justice moment.
Thank you so much, Rashad. I am driven by my passion and responsibility. We have a powerful preamble to our NEA mission, that we, the members of the National Education Association of the United States of America, are the voice of education professionals. Our work is fundamental to this nation, and we accept the profound trust that has been placed in us. In this moment, Rashad, our babies are depending on us to be worthy of them.
It's a great way to end. Thank you very much, Becky.
Thank you.